Welcome, viewers, to our deep dive into one of the most controversial aspects of Christian doctrine, the concept of hell. Today, we explore how fear has been intricately woven into religious teachings to shape beliefs about eternal punishment. Over time, the notion of hell has evolved, influenced by cultural, political, and social forces. In this video, we aim to expose the myths and question the historical narratives that underpin this doctrine. Get ready for an eye-opening journey as we unravel layers of tradition and challenge the status quo surrounding the lies of hell. Let's begin our careful investigation now. In early Christian thought, the concept of hell emerged as both a moral warning and a mysterious realm beyond life. Ancient texts describe fiery pits and endless torment, imagery designed to instill caution and enforce societal norms. Early theologians portrayed hell not merely as a physical place but as a state of separation from divine love. This portrayal served as a powerful deterrent against sin. As believers sought understanding of justice and retribution, the fear of eternal punishment became intertwined with spiritual discipline. Today, we revisit origins to question whether depictions were inspired by divine truth or shaped by ambition. Throughout history, leaders used the fear of hell to consolidate their authority and shape society. Political rulers and religious figures alike emphasized eternal damnation to deter rebellion and maintain social order. Medieval sermons and art vividly portrayed hell's torments, reinforcing obedience and discouraging moral transgressions. These depictions were often interwoven with local traditions and superstitions, creating a potent mix of myth and control. By promising salvation and threatening severe punishment, authorities manipulated public perception and behavior. This historical manipulation reveals how religious narratives were employed as instruments of power, blending spirituality with governance to influence the lives of countless believers. Religious doctrine has long exploited fear to regulate behavior and maintain order within communities. The threat of eternal punishment served as a psychological tool, ensuring adherence to prescribed moral codes. Families and congregations were taught that deviation from accepted practices would result in dire consequences in the afterlife. This pervasive anxiety reinforced a culture of obedience and conformity. By invoking images of suffering and isolation, spiritual leaders could discourage questioning and dissent. The use of fear, therefore, was not solely about faith but also a deliberate strategy to secure social cohesion and control over individual actions, influencing generations to come. Modern scholarship has sparked renewed debates over the literal interpretation of hell. Many theologians now argue that ancient depictions were symbolic, meant to convey moral lessons rather than actual fiery realms. This shift in perspective challenges the long-standing view of eternal damnation. Contemporary interpretations emphasize themes of redemption, compassion, and restorative justice. As believers and scholars alike re-examine sacred texts, the focus is moving away from fear-based teachings. Instead, many are exploring ideas that celebrate human potential and spiritual growth. These debates encourage a nuanced understanding of divine justice and invite followers to reimagine the nature of punishment and mercy. In today's world, the legacy of fear-based teachings continues to provoke debate within religious communities. The enduring image of hell influences not only individual spirituality but also broader cultural and political dialogues. Many question whether ancient warnings of eternal punishment are relevant in modern society. As faith evolves, some believers seek interpretations that emphasize love, forgiveness, and personal growth over fear. This shift reflects a desire to align spiritual practice with contemporary values. By critically examining historical narratives, communities are finding new ways to approach morality without relying solely on fear. The discussion invites a reimagined faith that nurtures hope. One of the most influential depictions of hell comes from Dante Alighieri's Inferno, part of his 14th-century epic, the Divine Comedy. Dante's vivid descriptions of hell's 9 circles, each punishing sinners according to their crimes, shaped the modern imagination of eternal torment. However, Dante's Inferno was a work of literature, not divine revelation. His imagery borrowed from classical mythology, personal vendettas, and medieval religious beliefs, reinforcing hell as a physical and horrifying place. Over centuries, religious institutions adopted Dante's vision, further embedding fear into Christian doctrine. But should we mistake poetic fiction for divine truth? Many aspects of Christian hell resemble older mythologies. The Greeks spoke of Hades, a shadowy underworld where souls were judged. Norse mythology depicted hell, a cold, desolate afterlife ruled by a goddess of the same name. Even Egyptian beliefs included a judgment process where hearts were weighed. Christianity absorbed these influences, repurposing them to fit its theological framework. The fiery pits of hell and eternal suffering were not unique to Christianity but were shaped by centuries of cross-cultural storytelling. Recognizing these parallels calls into question whether hell is an original divine truth or an inherited concept. The earliest biblical texts describe the afterlife in more neutral terms. In the Hebrew Bible, Sheol is a shadowy realm where all the dead reside, not a place of punishment. Similarly, the Greek concept of Hades is simply the underworld. However, later Christian interpretations, influenced by cultural and theological shifts, transformed these ideas into the eternal lake of fire described in the Book of Revelation. This evolution reflects how religious doctrine changed over time, adapting to new influences and reinforcing fear-based beliefs that were not originally present in sacred texts. Many assume that Jesus frequently preached about hell, but a closer examination of the Gospel suggests otherwise. Jesus often spoke in parables, using metaphors to describe moral and spiritual lessons. The term Gehenna, often translated as hell, originally referred to a literal valley outside Jerusalem, associated with waste burning and destruction. Jesus' warnings about Gehenna may have been symbolic rather than references to a fiery afterlife. When viewed through a historical lens, his teachings seem to emphasize justice, repentance, and transformation rather than eternal torment. The Book of Revelation is one of the most dramatic and mysterious books in the Bible, filled with apocalyptic imagery, beasts, and fiery judgment. Many interpretations of hell originate from its descriptions of the lake of fire. However, Revelation is highly symbolic, written during a time of Roman persecution to offer hope to suffering Christians. Scholars argue that its warnings were meant for the people of that time rather than a literal prophecy of eternal punishment. By understanding its historical context, we can question whether Revelation's imagery should be taken as a blueprint for hell or as a metaphor for divine justice. Christianity is not the only religion with a concept of hell. Hinduism describes Naraka, a temporary realm where souls are purified. Buddhism speaks of multiple hells where suffering is temporary and based on karma. Islam has Jahannam, a fiery place of judgment but with an eventual path to redemption for many. These varying depictions reveal that hell is often shaped by cultural beliefs rather than universal divine truth. Comparing these perspectives shows that the idea of eternal torment is far from a singular or uncontested belief. The fear of eternal damnation has caused significant psychological distress for many believers. Religious trauma syndrome, RTS, is a condition experienced by those who struggle with intense fear, guilt, and anxiety related to their religious upbringing. The belief in hell can create long-term mental health issues, leading individuals to live in fear of making mistakes or questioning their faith. This raises ethical concerns about using fear as a tool for religious control. Should faith be built on love and understanding rather than fear of punishment? Historically, the fear of hell has been a powerful tool for religious institutions to gain influence and wealth. In medieval Europe, the Catholic Church sold indulgences, allowing people to pay for the reduction of their time in purgatory. Televangelists today use the threat of hell to pressure followers into financial donations. The commercialization of fear has long been a strategy to control and profit from believers. Recognizing this helps expose how religious fear has often been exploited for financial and political gain. From medieval paintings of tortured souls to modern horror films, artistic depictions of hell have fueled fear for centuries. Renaissance artists like Hieronymus Bosch painted grotesque visions of the damned, influencing cultural perceptions. Even today, movies and books use hell as a terrifying backdrop. But should religious belief be shaped by artistic imagination? The persistence of hell in creative works shows how fiction and theology have blended, reinforcing fear-based narratives that may not reflect biblical truth. Universalism is the belief that all souls will ultimately be reconciled with God, rejecting the idea of eternal punishment. Many early church fathers, such as Origen, believed in the eventual redemption of all people. This perspective challenges the mainstream doctrine of hell by focusing on divine mercy rather than wrath. As more theologians explore this idea, it raises an important question: is an all-loving God truly compatible with eternal suffering? Annihilationism is the belief that instead of eternal torment, the wicked simply cease to exist. This interpretation aligns with verses that speak of the destruction of the soul rather than endless suffering. Some Christian denominations, such as the Seventh-day Adventists, embrace this view. It presents an alternative to the traditional hell doctrine, suggesting that divine justice is about complete removal rather than infinite punishment. Many modern believers are moving away from fear-based faith, seeking a spirituality grounded in love and personal growth. Progressive Christian movements emphasize grace, compassion, and justice over fear and control. This shift challenges the long-standing tradition of using hell as a means of obedience. Faith should inspire hope, not terror. If God is all-loving, why create a system where people suffer forever? The concept of hell raises deep philosophical questions about free will and divine justice. Many struggle to reconcile eternal punishment with a benevolent deity. This paradox fuels ongoing theological debates, questioning whether traditional hell doctrines align with God's nature. Challenging the doctrine of hell is not about abandoning faith but seeking truth. The willingness to question fear-based teachings allows for a more meaningful spiritual journey. Fear should never be the foundation of belief. Curiosity, wisdom, and love should guide faith instead. During the Middle Ages, the concept of hell became more rigid and terrifying, largely due to the influence of the Catholic Church. The doctrine of purgatory was introduced as an intermediate state where souls could be purified before reaching heaven. However, the fear of hell remained a primary motivator for religious devotion and obedience. Many church leaders used this fear to exert control over the population, encouraging participation in religious sacraments and financial contributions to the church. The widespread belief in hell reinforced strict moral codes, making it a fundamental part of medieval Christian life. Throughout history, passionate preachers have used the concept of hell to stir emotional responses from their congregations. During the Great Awakenings in the 18th and 19th centuries, preachers like Jonathan Edwards delivered fiery sermons, warning of the dangers of eternal damnation. His famous sermon, "Sinners in the Hands of an Angry God," painted vivid images of sinners dangling over the flames of hell, held up only by God's mercy. This kind of preaching sought to instill deep fear in listeners, driving them toward repentance. But should faith be built on fear, or should it be inspired by love and understanding? Many evangelists have used the threat of hell as a tool for conversion. The idea is simple: if people fear eternal punishment, they are more likely to turn to religion for salvation. While this approach has been effective in growing religious movements, it also raises ethical concerns. Is it right to use fear to persuade people to believe? Some argue that a faith built on fear is unstable and can lead to religious trauma, while others see it as a necessary warning. As religious thought evolves, many modern churches are moving away from this fear-based approach. Religious deconstruction is a process where individuals critically examine their beliefs, often leading to a re-evaluation of doctrines like hell. Many former believers have abandoned the traditional concept of hell after realizing how much it relies on fear and manipulation. Instead, they embrace alternative spiritual perspectives that focus on love, grace, and inner growth. The deconstruction movement has grown in recent years, with more people questioning long-held religious teachings. This shift reflects a broader trend of moving away from punitive religious systems and toward more compassionate interpretations of faith. Modern psychology and neuroscience suggest that much of what we perceive as religious fear stems from conditioning rather than divine truth. Studies on religious trauma show that repeated exposure to fear-based teachings can cause long-term anxiety and distress. Additionally, scientific advancements in understanding consciousness have raised questions about the nature of an afterlife. Without concrete evidence of hell, many scholars argue that it exists primarily as a psychological and cultural construct rather than a literal place of suffering. One of the most concerning aspects of hell doctrine is its impact on children. Many religious communities teach children from a young age that they could suffer eternal torment if they do not follow specific rules. This can lead to nightmares, anxiety, and a deep fear of making mistakes. Psychologists warn that instilling this kind of fear in young minds can result in long-term emotional damage. Should children be taught spirituality through love and encouragement rather than through threats of eternal suffering? Many people who have had near-death experiences, NDEs, describe feelings of peace, love, and light, rather than visions of torment and suffering. While some report distressing NDEs, the majority of these experiences suggest that the afterlife is not as horrifying as traditional hell doctrines imply. If hell were a fundamental reality, wouldn't more people who have been clinically dead describe it? The lack of consistent evidence for hell raises serious questions about its existence and whether it is merely a product of religious conditioning. One of the biggest theological debates centers around whether eternal punishment aligns with the concept of a loving and merciful God. Many Christians struggle with the idea that a benevolent deity would create a system where people suffer forever. Some theologians argue that hell is inconsistent with God's nature, while others claim that divine justice requires punishment. This contradiction has led many believers to rethink their understanding of God's character and the true meaning of justice. The idea of hell has evolved significantly throughout history. Early Jewish and Christian texts describe an afterlife very different from the fiery pits of later theology. Over time, religious leaders adapted the idea of hell to fit the needs of their societies, reinforcing moral behavior and obedience. In modern times, many denominations have softened their views on hell, focusing instead on God's grace and redemption. As society changes, so do religious interpretations, proving that doctrines are not set in stone but shaped by cultural and historical influences. One of the most powerful aspects of hell doctrine is its ability to instill guilt. Many believers are taught that even minor sins could lead to eternal damnation, creating an overwhelming sense of unworthiness. This guilt can manifest in unhealthy ways, leading to anxiety, depression, and a distorted sense of self-worth. Religious leaders have long used guilt as a means of control, ensuring that followers remain dependent on their guidance. Breaking free from guilt-based religion allows individuals to develop a healthier, more empowering faith. If hell exists as a place of punishment, does it truly represent justice? Many argue that eternal suffering is an extreme and disproportionate consequence for finite sins. The idea of a loving God sentencing people to infinite torment for mistakes made in a short lifetime seems unfair. Justice, in its purest form, should be about restoration and rehabilitation rather than eternal condemnation. This perspective challenges the traditional understanding of hell and opens the door for alternative interpretations of divine justice. Some theologians and philosophers suggest that hell is not a literal place but a metaphor for human suffering and spiritual turmoil. This interpretation aligns with the idea that suffering is often self-imposed through our actions and choices. Rather than seeing hell as a punishment inflicted by God, this view suggests that it represents the internal consequences of our decisions. This perspective allows for a more compassionate and introspective understanding of morality and personal growth. As society becomes more informed and critical of traditional religious doctrines, fear-based beliefs like hell are losing their influence. Many younger generations reject the idea of eternal punishment in favor of spirituality that promotes love, acceptance, and self-discovery. With the rise of secularism and progressive faith movements, the question arises: can a religion that relies on fear survive in an age of reason and compassion? For many, letting go of the belief in hell is a liberating experience. It removes the burden of fear and allows for a more authentic relationship with spirituality. Rejecting hell does not mean rejecting morality, it means embracing a faith that is guided by love rather than fear. People who abandon the concept of hell often find greater peace, happiness, and a deeper sense of personal responsibility for their actions. Does fear of hell make people more moral, or does it simply force obedience? Many argue that true morality comes from genuine compassion and empathy, not fear of punishment. Studies show that societies with secular or more lenient religious views often have lower crime rates, suggesting that ethical behavior does not depend on belief in hell. If goodness is only motivated by fear, is it really goodness at all? A morality based on love and understanding is far more sustainable than one rooted in terror. One of the greatest philosophical challenges to the concept of hell is the issue of proportionality. Can any sin committed in a finite lifetime truly deserve infinite punishment? The idea of eternal torment contradicts principles of justice that emphasize fairness and rehabilitation. Many religious scholars argue that divine justice should focus on restoration rather than never-ending suffering. This raises the question, if God is just, can eternal hell truly exist? Fear-based teachings have shaped not just religious belief but entire societies. The fear of hell has been used to justify oppressive laws, social hierarchies, and even acts of violence. Throughout history, leaders have used religious fear to maintain power and suppress dissent. By understanding how fear has been weaponized, we can challenge outdated beliefs and work toward a society built on compassion rather than control.
Welcome to Blessovia Science TV, where we take you on an exhilarating journey through the cosmos and unravel the mysteries of science. We are excited to offer you the opportunity to become a valued member of our ever-growing community of cosmic enthusiasts and knowledge seekers. Exclusive access to cosmic content. As a member of Blessovia Science TV, you will gain exclusive access to a treasure trove of cosmic content, including documentaries, interviews with leading scientists, space missions updates, and awe-inspiring visualizations of the universe, live Q, and sessions with experts. Your membership will grant you the chance to participate in live Q and sessions with renowned scientists, astronomers, and space explorers. Get your burning questions answered by those who push the boundaries of human knowledge. Embark on a journey that spans the cosmos and join us in unraveling the secrets of the universe. Become a Blessovia Science TV member today, and together we will reach for the stars. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and share. Don't forget to leave your comment.